Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're jumping into what might be the single biggest challenge in the entire world of ESG, Scope 3 emissions. For years, companies have been focused on the emissions they directly control, but the real problem, and it turns out the real opportunity, has been hiding in plain sight, deep inside their global value chains. Okay, so let's just start with this visual, because it says it all. For so many companies, what we think of as their carbon footprint, the stuff from their factories, their vehicles, their electricity, which is called Scopes 1 and 2, that's just the tip of the iceberg. The huge chunk, we're talking over 90%, comes from somewhere else entirely. And that's Scope 3. So what is Scope 3 exactly? Well, the easiest way to think about it is it's everything that happens outside a company's own four walls. It is the entire story of a product's carbon life, from the very beginning, the raw materials pulled out of the ground, all the way to the very end, to how we, the customers, use and eventually get rid of their products. It's the whole shebang. And that brings us right here. We've got to unpack the sheer scale of this challenge. Because it's not just big, for a lot of companies, it's pretty much the entire problem. Just look at that number. For huge industries, think automotive, electronics, all the consumer goods we buy, Scope 3 can be up to 95% of their total carbon footprint. It really explains why you've seen companies work so hard to clean up their direct operations, only to see their overall climate scores barely budge. Well, yeah, they've been focusing on the 5%. And this isn't coming from just one place. It's not a single leaky pipe you can fix. It's a web. These emissions are literally woven into every single part of a product's life. It starts with mining, continues through a supplier's factory, and it keeps going long after that product is sold and, eventually tossed out. It exists, by its very definition, way beyond the factory gates. But, the massive size of this problem is really only half the story. The thing that makes Scope 3 so tough is way more fundamental. It's a problem of control and visibility. And this chart just lays it out perfectly. With Scopes 1 and 2, you're managing what's inside your house, right? You've got the data, you own the equipment. But with Scope 3, you're trying to manage emissions happening in buildings you don't own and with operations you don't actually run. It's a totally different ballgame. This quote from our source material just hits the nail on the head. Companies are held accountable for emissions they do not directly produce and cannot easily measure. That's the core dilemma, right there. It's a huge accountability challenge. How are you supposed to reduce something you can't even easily see or measure, let alone command? And to see just how complex this gets, think about this. A single, simple bolt, before it even gets to the final assembly line, it might have passed through 6 or 7 different layers of suppliers. So to really get your arms around your emissions, you can't just talk to your direct supplier. You need visibility deep into their supply chain and their supplier's suppliers. It goes on and on. So, okay, you're faced with this massive, complicated problem. What do you do? Well, the leading companies aren't just throwing their hands up. They are actually starting to solve it. They're writing a whole new playbook for decarbonization. And that strategy really unfolds in 4 key stages. But it all, and I mean all of it, starts with a simple truth. You cannot manage what you can't measure. So step 1, before anything else, is to pull back that curtain and get real, detailed visibility deep into your value chain. And a huge breakthrough here is this shift away from using these generic, industry average numbers. The old way was basically just guessing. The new method, it's about getting real primary data straight from the suppliers themselves. And that lets you see who your high and low performers are, so you can focus your energy where it's actually going to make a difference. But hey, data by itself isn't enough. The next big step is this move away from just demanding compliance and toward true collaboration. The best companies aren't just sending out surveys anymore. They are actively helping their suppliers decarbonize, offering training, financial incentives, and even proving that becoming more energy efficient can actually lower costs for everybody in the long run. And at the same time, these companies are looking inward. They're actually redesigning the very products they sell to be less carbon intensive right from the drawing board. And this means rethinking literally everything, from the materials they pick to how the product is actually built. And here is where it all comes together, and this is so important. Carbon is becoming the 4th pillar of procurement. It's sitting right alongside cost, quality, and delivery. Think about that. When your suppliers know that their carbon footprint directly affects whether they win your business, well, that changes everything. It shifts the entire market's incentive to invest in this stuff. Now, this whole transformation isn't just happening in a bubble. It's getting a massive push from two powerful forces that are making Scope 3 a top priority: technology and regulation.
First, you've got these incredible new digital tools that are giving companies a level of visibility that was frankly impossible even 5 years ago. AI, especially, is a game changer. It can crunch massive amounts of data to pinpoint emission hotspots and even predict the impact of different choices.
And at the very same time, governments all over the world are making Scope 3 disclosure a requirement. It's not a voluntary, nice-to-have thing anymore. And this regulatory push is forcing companies to get serious, to invest in high-quality, auditable data. Compliance is becoming a huge driver of change. So all of this brings us to the ultimate takeaway. What does solving this incredibly hard problem actually mean for a business? Well, the answer is, it's so much more than just a compliance headache. The first and maybe most critical insight is that you have to change your mindset. You cannot solve Scope 3 if it's just siloed over in the sustainability department. It's not just a reporting problem you can delegate.
Now, it means you have to bake climate thinking into the very core of your business. It's about breaking down those old walls between sustainability, R&D, and procurement, and making carbon a factor in how products are designed and sourced from day one.
And for the companies that actually get this right, the payoffs go way beyond just ticking a box for compliance. We're talking about building deeper partnerships, discovering new innovations in materials, and creating value chains that are way more efficient and resilient for whatever the future holds. So we'll end on this question. By forcing companies to totally rethink their products, their partnerships, and their processes from the ground up, could it be that this massive challenge of Scope 3 is actually the very thing that will separate the leaders from the laggards in the new low-carbon economy? It stops being about just reducing a negative and starts being about building a new, powerful, competitive, positive.